Hi everyone, this video lesson focuses on multiplying with negative numbers. It's the third in a series of 4 videos about working with negatives. There's still division with negatives yet to come, so because it's the third in the series, I'm going to call it video 2C. Once again, I'm assuming that this is review for the people watching this video. There is a more detailed video on my website for people who want more information, but assuming that this is review, let's look at some sample problems. Here are 18 of them. You'll notice that what I've done is indicate multiplication in different ways. In the first case, the numbers are separated by parentheses. In the second case, they're separated by this, well, why don't I look at it, show it this way, with color. That'll really draw it out. When I've used the X to indicate multiplication, they're in yellow here. Sometimes, though, I've used a dot, as people often will, to indicate multiplication. I've indicated those in green here, just so you can see there are 3 different ways of indicating multiplication. All of these should be ways that are comfortable to you. If not, well, you need to build that comfort in practicing with this video and other work that I can give you. There is also, at the bottom you'll notice, a set of exponents and exponential terms, and I want you to go ahead and do all of these. Let's clear the color out of the way so this is easier to work with. Make sure you're doing this without a calculator. Doing this with a calculator doesn't prove anything in terms of your knowledge. So I want you to hit the pause button, and without a calculator, go ahead and solve all 18. When you come back, I'll show you the answers. Alright, I'm going to assume that you've done that and that you're ready to see the answers, and here they are. Now, if you have all 18 of them correct, or 17 of them correct, with one that was a simple mistake you don't think you'll make again, then maybe you don't need to watch this video. But certainly most of the students that I've encountered do need to practice their work with multiplying negative numbers. It's once again one of these foundation skills that really comes back to haunt some people in the second semester, even in future years, because they simply haven't built this skill and honed it correctly. So I want to make sure that unless you're absolutely certain you have this down, that you go ahead and practice as much as you need to get it down pat. I would expect the most likely sources of mistakes might have happened down here, working with these problems 15 through 18. I promise I will explain those. In fact, I'll explain the skills to solve all of these in this video. Let's get going on that. In this first slide, which you can probably tell from the graphic design I've simply taken from the Houghton Mifflin textbook, I want to focus on the first 2 problems for now, A and B. Notice in the case of A, I've got 1, 2 numbers that have negatives, whereas in B, I've got 1, 2, 3 numbers that have negatives. In the first case, those first 2 negatives cancel each other out, and you're going to end up with a positive result. In the second case, well, this negative and that one canceled each other out, but you still had 1 left over. Anytime you have an odd number of negatives, 3, 5, 7, whatever it might be, you're going to end up with a negative result. So these are the results you should have gotten: 24, positive 24 that is, and negative 3. And once again, you should be doing this without a calculator. I'm working with numbers that are small enough. You should be able to do this with pencil and paper without the need for a calculator. Now let's go on to C here, the situation that I said was most likely to cause confusion for the most students. Negative 1 to the 4th. Well, you've got, what you actually have here is negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1. That's what this 4 means. It simply means to repeat what's next to it, in this case that negative 1 in parentheses, 4 times. So here it is shown here, negative 1, a string of 4 negative 1s. Well, this is an even number of negatives. They're all going to cancel each other out, and you're going to get a positive result. The negative 1 times negative 1 becomes positive 1. This negative 1 times that negative 1 becomes positive 1, and you end up with positive 1 as your answer. But note, please, that negative 1 to the 4th, the way that it was given to you, down here is not the same as this. There's a very important distinction. In the case that I gave you, like I said, you have a string of 4 negative 1s next to each other. And they all the negatives cancel each other out, and you end up with a positive result. But in the second case here, negative 1 to the 4th, what you actually have here is a negative sign times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1. Only one negative. Why? Because the exponent only applies to what it's immediately next to, and it's immediately next to that 1. So you've got a string of 4 1s, but you only have one negative sign. And again, if you have an odd number of negatives, your result is going to be negative. In this case, the exponent is next to everything inside the parentheses, so everything in the parentheses gets duplicated or copied 4 times. An important difference that a lot of students tend to get confused about. One more point to make. The commutative property works again with multiplication as it did with addition. Remember, I said it doesn't work with subtraction but does with addition, and it does with multiplication. You'll find it does not with division. One way of thinking of this is the commutative property works with the operations that build. Addition and multiplication build to larger numbers generally, and doesn't work with the ones that reduce or break apart. Subtraction and division tend to do that, and subtraction and division are not commutative. So it doesn't matter whether I multiply a times b or b times a, I'm going to get the same result. So like here, 3 times negative 2 is going to be the same thing as negative 2 times 3. You can make more use of that with a longer problem like this. Maybe you'd rather see the negatives next to each other. So, simply move them and reorder them. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, it might be easier for you to see that the negatives cancel, and you're going to end up with a positive result. Okay, wrapping this up, here are the last few questions that were on the first slide, the first challenge. Why don't you hit the pause button and take another crack at this now that you've watched this video and see if we do better. Hit the pause button. When you come back, I'll show you the answers. All right, I'm going to assume that you've done that work. Here, once again, are those answers. And again, I said that the bottom ones tend to be the ones that cause the most confusion. Let's just kind of spell those out a little bit better. In the case of 15, the whole thing, negative 3, gets duplicated twice. But in the case of 16, only the 3 gets duplicated twice. In the case of 17, the 1 gets duplicated 3 times. In the case of 18, the whole negative 1 gets duplicated 3 times, or copied 3 times. So notice, negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1, that's an odd number, so you're going to have a negative result. In this case, there was only 1, again, an odd number of negatives, so you're going to get a negative result. In this case, an odd number, only 1 negative, so a negative result. But in this case, 2 negatives, they cancel each other out. This is the one that should have turned out positive. Okay, if you have more questions about this, don't hesitate to bring them into class. I look forward to seeing you.